The Crypto Markets Update is brought to you by KuCoin, the best place to find the next crypto gem. All right, joining us now to discuss all this green in the crypto markets is Noelle Acheson, Head of Market Insights at Genesis Global Trading, a sister company to CoinDesk in Madrid. Welcome, Noelle. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Christine. Great to be with you.
All right, so tell us a bit about what is the catalyst behind all this green we're seeing with Bitcoin and the crypto markets? Why this bounce now?
Well, as usual in crypto markets, Christine, it's never just one thing. There's actually quite a lot of really exciting things to go on. I do have to say these are my opinions, not those of my employer, and nothing I say, as usual, is investment advice. But what we're looking at, basically, Christine, is a general improvement in market sentiment. And our trading desks started commenting last week that they were seeing a more bullish tone. Some derivative market metrics started flashing some signals. And a couple that come to mind, for instance, are the 1 month CME basis for Bitcoin, also the Bitcoin futures open interest. I mean, even just as on Friday, they were both at their highest levels so far this year. We've also seen significant improvement, or should I say signs of growing institutional support just over the past 10 days, Christine. We've seen signals from BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, Cohen, Virtu, Bridgewater, and probably missing a couple. All of them just basically making statements that they believe that the crypto markets are worth dedicating more resources to. We have continued buying from Terra's Luna Foundation Guard, and we also have, through the relatively lackluster markets that we've seen over the past few weeks, continued accumulation going on, judging from on-chain data. We now have over 70% of Bitcoin in circulation is now held in what are called long-term addresses, and over 75% is currently held in what are called illiquid addresses. All of this has set up the Bitcoin market for a sharp move when sentiment eventually turned, which it looks like it has.
All right, so institutional adoption, a lot of buying from crypto firms, like you mentioned, the Luna Foundation Guard. I wonder, so they've set out a goal they've been buying Bitcoin at $125 million increments, allegedly, according to what folks believe is a Luna address, by transferring out Tether, about $125 million increments. They've stated a goal of buying about $3 billion worth of Bitcoin in reserves, and potentially in the longer term, $10 billion. I wonder how sustainable you believe that is.
I believe that they will do what they have said they are going to do. What's actually a more interesting question is this already priced in? And if not, why not? It looks like it's a mixture of both, partly priced in, partly not. The big move yesterday, and this is probably worth clarifying, the jump that held us transfixed for a while was actually because of short covering. So this was a derivatives triggered move up, and also market structure, basically. But we can't overlook the bullish momentum that brought us to a position in the market where those shorts had to be covered. So it's not the whole story. The whole story is the factors that we've talked about before, including the expectation that the Luna Foundation Guard will continue to purchase Bitcoin in the open market. This is more than offsetting the disappointment that we saw last week in the market that the El Salvador Bitcoin bond was not going to happen as planned.
You know, Bitcoin about 15% since Russia's Ukraine invasion, and I wondered how much of the price is related to Ukraine. Something you didn't mention, but perhaps would that explain it at all? Do we have any data that might suggest that?
It is definitely a factor. We don't have concrete data, and even if we did, the on-chain part of it's always somewhat to be treated with skepticism. And of course, the news reporting, especially that coming out of Russia, also needs a degree of skepticism. But it is definitely material, and it's part of the growing confidence that I mentioned earlier. This is growing confidence that Bitcoin's use case as a seizure-resistant store of value is important for the world. It's not just about speculation. It's not just about number go up. We are seeing in our headlines almost every day now cases when this actually really does matter to people. It's not just the war, although that certainly has accelerated. We started seeing that with the Canadian truckers' strike. We started seeing this even as far back as the Afghanistan debacle. This kind of headline is a refreshing change, because you've probably heard this before, Christine, but a couple of years ago, even just a few months ago, people would say that Bitcoin's best advertisement was its price. I think we can agree now that that is no longer its best advertisement. Its best advertisement, just the headlines that we see every day.
Mm-hmm. I wonder about the timing as well, because we've been seeing a lot of these weekend rallies with Bitcoin, with the crypto markets. And why is that? And I noticed that you tweeted out a spike last night price, which coincided with the volumes in a coin.
Weekends are thinner, and I think that's the basic reason. Not only are weekends thinner because the US markets tend to be shut, and some people actually like to take weekends off, who knew? Asian markets do account for quite a lot of liquidity, but the volume is thinner on the weekend. So when a sharp move happens, it tends to happen on the weekend. That, combined with the increasing accumulation behavior that I mentioned earlier, means that there is, in general, less Bitcoin available for new entrants, which underscores the idea that when the market moves, it'll move fast, and that trigger is actually likely to happen on the weekend. An interesting feature, Christine, is that we saw the short covering push the price up sharply. We saw the expected sharp movement over the weekends. We were just talking about this last week, in fact. But what's interesting is that the price has stayed above 47,000 now for some time being relative. So far today, that's a strong signal that this wasn't just a market structure issue.
Any other coins you're looking at in the alts with Ether, Noelle?
Ether is interesting. I look at all of them, as you probably know, and there's a lot going on, especially further down the line on some of the new DeFi opportunities and the development that is happening, especially on layer zeros. But Ether is particularly interesting because I'm hearing, you're probably hearing the same thing, increasing interest in Ether, given the growing conviction that the merge will happen within the next few months, increasing research into what that'll actually mean for Ether, increasing development from apps getting ready for the merge. It's an exciting time to be looking at Ether. This is not investment advice. I do want to repeat that, but it's a fascinating experiment, and we have never had such an audacious technological experiment play out in real time. They're trying to change the way Ether works, while Ether is already easily the largest layer one network. So that's going to be something fascinating to watch. The search for yield continues, and we're examining how the yield will change on Ether, and as well as the yields of how will they change on some of the other layer one and staking assets that are out there. The search for yield is something that I believe will continue to intensify, even if rates continue to go up, and then there is an if there. So I've never seen so much diversity in the opportunities in the crypto market before. And as you know, I've been looking at this for a long time. It's never been this exciting and this interesting. Plus, one more thing, Christine, just take a look at the funding that is being raised, not just by companies, but by ecosystem funds and venture capital funds. That funding is going to be deployed, and that funding is going to invest in and generate further technological development as well as mainstream interest.
Mm-hmm. Just one last question before the weekend, we had talked a lot of $1,000 being a key resistance level for Bitcoin, and we did see it tested time and time again on Friday. It is now broken through that level. So where do we go from here? Is that the key critical level before we see higher highs?
I would be honest with you, I'm not a technical analyst, so I don't know is the answer. I do know there is momentum. I do know that the market structure is in favor of things going higher. I do want to say, though, that there's still so much uncertainty in the market at the moment. We've never been in a situation where we are raising rates just as inflation starts to pick off, just as it looks like the economy might start to turn. And the stock market does not seem to be taking that into account. account. That's not terribly surprising. Stock market has traditionally gone up as rates go up and tends to turn as rates peak. But this is a very different macroeconomic environment. The uncertainty of predicting where rates are going to go while there is a war on in Europe, this is something that only the very, very brave would dare to attempt at this stage. So in spite of the change to a more bullish tone in the crypto markets, there is obviously an underlying warning of caution there, because depending on what happens with the war, and wars by their very nature are very unpredictable, things could still turn very ugly very fast.